is Charlie, and I am so glad you're here. Have you ever thought about what life was like before Google? Or as my grandma calls it, the Googler. But maybe a better question is, can you imagine life without Google or TikTok or YouTube to search for things? I mean, they have all the answers. I know it may seem hard to even think about getting answers to questions without going to the internet, but trust me, there was a time when you had to use other ways to find answers, and there still is today. As a matter of fact, I want you to take a few minutes with your group to write down and talk about some things you absolutely know all the answers to. It was the last night of our confirmation class, and we had this thing where it's called Stump the Pastor. And so me and a couple other pastors were up on stage, and all of these middle schoolers were like throwing questions at us left and right. And the question that I got was, Miss Charlie, are there dragons in the Bible? I don't know. That's all I could think of. I was so stumped, and they wouldn't let me have my phone so I could Google it. I don't know if there's dragons in the Bible. Do you know if there's dragons in the Bible? I don't know. It's so hard when you don't know something. I think we've all been there, right? It's easy to feel like we have to know all the answers about everything, like how to do the latest challenge or dance on TikTok, or like who's the best NBA player of all time, or even what we think about an important issue or what's happening in the world. All right, your turn to talk about some of the times that you pretended to know the answer to something. With your group, talk about these two questions. But what if we don't have those answers? What do we do? For some of us, we hide that we don't know because we want others to think we're smart and old enough to understand. For others of us, we go along with other people's ideas and opinions and answers so we don't stand out for not knowing. And for some of us, we act like we know it all, even if we don't know if it's right. When we respond in these ways, we end up not asking questions, not being open to changing our minds, and not admitting that we're unsure. And eventually, we become the exact opposite of a party starter, especially when it comes to our faith. We become somebody who knows, assumes, and defends. So when we think we know, we assume we're right and defend that position no matter what. We're showing that we have these strong feelings and thoughts and opinions that aren't really open to change. And when we do this, we stop being curious. We stop wondering. We close our ears to wisdom or advice or opinions from anyone who thinks anything else in the same way we think. Now, I don't know about you. That just doesn't sound fun to me. Honestly, it just keeps us from experiencing the type of full life that Jesus promised. So when we don't know the answer to something, especially when it comes to the whole faith thing, what can we do instead? Can we do something besides know, assume, and defending? To help us out here, we're going to look at something a guy named Luke documented about Jesus's life in the book of the Bible called Luke. This is where he recorded Jesus's birth, childhood, and teenage years. Is it crazy for you? Because it's crazy for me when I think about Jesus being a teenager, right? Today, we're reading about when Jesus was a preteen. He was with his parents, Mary and Joseph, and they were traveling from Jerusalem for the Passover holiday. Now, this is something every Jewish person did back then, no matter where they lived. It was part of their custom to return to Jerusalem for this remembrance of how God saved the Jewish people hundreds of years before. The city, it was so crowded, and there was very little room for everyone. And as it turned out, this trip became a disaster. And when we talk about disasters, you know the infamous Taylor Swift Ticketmaster waiting room? Yeah, it was like that, but real life. So you can imagine the stress when Mary and Joseph were on the journey back home and they realized Jesus wasn't in the group they were traveling with. Even worse, they didn't discover Jesus was missing until they'd been traveling for a full day. Talk about panic and stress. I mean, they lost God's son. Hello? Whew. Okay, so Mary and Joseph, they searched for Jesus for 2 full days, and then they headed back to the temple, and when they got there, who did they see? You know, we'll say it together, Jesus. He was just there hanging out with these religious leaders. He was asking questions, listening to their answers like nothing was wrong at all. Would your mom and dad do the same thing? Maybe I shouldn't say that, but come on, people. Your parents lost him for 2 days. He's just like hanging out with these people. Anyway, Luke told us that their conversation went this way. His parents didn't know what to think. Son, his mother said to him, Why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been frantic, searching for you everywhere. But why did you need to search? Jesus asked. Didn't you know that I must be in my father's house? But they didn't understand what he meant. So the whole family, they left Jerusalem and headed back to Nazareth. And let me tell you, Mary made sure Jesus was with them this time. Luke wrote about it like this. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. This is the only passage in the entire Bible that we have of Jesus as a preteen. Putting the stress of losing your kid aside, what Jesus did in this passage was really fascinating. See, Jesus spent his time trying to learn. He asked questions. He was curious. He listened to the wisdom of others in his life. And this is so amazing because honestly, Jesus didn't have to listen to these guys to learn. He is God in human form. If anybody has the right to know, assume, and defend their position as the correct one, it's Jesus. But that's not what he did. His mom and dad found Jesus in the temple, learning from all these religious leaders, asking questions, seeking out knowledge and wisdom. Did Jesus already know all the answers? I mean, probably, but I think he made an effort to learn from others to show us how to live. See, a party starter knows there's always something to learn from others. Jesus set that example for us. He showed us that we should be curious. We should be honest about what we don't know and what we do know. We can look for answers. We can listen to the wisdom of others as we learn and grow and even change our minds. After all, that's what a party starter does. Because a party starter knows there's always something to learn from others. Take a few minutes to discuss these questions with your group. What's cool is that Jesus continued to set this example for us throughout his whole life and ministry. Over 20 years later, in Jesus' most famous sermon ever, he taught what it meant to live the full life God promises. In it, he says this, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened." Now, just before this, Jesus was talking about humility. Humility is putting others first by giving up what you think you deserve. Jesus was encouraging his followers to stop judging and to take on more humility than arrogance. Jesus told them to ask, seek, and knock. So it could be that Jesus told us exactly what to ask, seek, and knock for in these verses. We ask for humility. We seek answers through curiosity and questions. We knock looking for wisdom. And when we find those things, we receive them. So that's what I want to challenge you to do this week. Instead of know, assume, defend, try, ask, seek, knock. What if we stopped living and behaving like we had to have it all figured out? What if instead we start asking questions? Questions like, what can I learn from you about this? What can I do differently because I don't know everything? What might I be getting wrong? What am I curious to know more about? Who is someone I want to learn something new from? Where do I need to ask, seek, and knock to find wisdom? Because here's the thing. Admitting we don't know everything isn't a sign of weakness or that we're not smart. It shows that we understand it's impossible to know everything. And if Jesus spent time learning, growing, and asking questions, then we should too. We should find wise people in our lives to learn from and listen to as we grow in our faith. Friends, take a look around the room. There's some people in here you could ask. A party starter knows there's more to know and so many people to learn from, that the more curious we are, the more exciting meeting new people is. That it's never a party with people who think they know it all and understand it all and have it all figured out. The party is with people who are more like Jesus, people who know there's always more to learn and more people to learn from. So we're gonna take a few minutes to discuss this with your group. Remember, friends, a party starter knows there's always something to learn from others. And the sooner we begin living like we have something to learn, the sooner the world begins to look more like the party Jesus imagined.